Very nice to meet you. My name is Hwang Jin-hoi, and I am just a research fellow at Korea Maritime Institute. I was the chairman of the Korea Cruise Forum before, but currently I'm just a member. Today, I would like to talk about the challenges, development directions, and major policies of the Korea cruise industry. And this is the content of my presentation. So I will begin my presentation with the global and Asia cruise industry trends and what kind of tolls and sufferings we have had because of COVID-19. And then in the second chapter, I am going to touch upon the Korean cruise industry status and problems. So I would like to diagnose the current situation of the Korean cruise industry today and what are the problems that we have to overcome. And then I will move on to talk about directions and strategies for the development of the Korean cruise industry and conclusion. Here you can see the status of the global cruise industry. So in year 2020 and 2021, you can see that the number of cruise fleets in operation are reduced by 11 and the passenger capacity reduced by 7.2. And in fact, the entire number of the global travelers decreased from 24 million to 3 million. And if you look at the Asian market, again, the 45 cruises ships that were in operation got reduced, and also the number of the passenger volumes decreased from 37 million to 4 million, or rather 3.7 million to 490,000. And here you can see the trend and outlook of the global cruise market. So the total number of the cruise travelers decreased down to 5.73 million, but next year we will see the growth. So passenger volume are expected to reach 19 million beyond 2022. So I believe that after year 22, we will have the robust recovery. And I believe that a lot of cruise ships will be returned to normal operation. And here you see the figures and numbers of the global cruise ship operation. So in 2019, 403 vessels sailed, were sailing with the 600,000 cabins and 27.76 million passenger capacity. However, in year 2021, 412 are expected to return to normal operations with 22.3 million passenger capacity. And here you see the cruise ship shipbuilding trend and outlook, which will be elaborated later by Professor Chu Young-yeol. And if you look at the amount of order placed for global cruise shipbuilding, it's actually more than 100, and they will all be out to the market. And the average price of this ship is about $5.5 billion. So this massive amount of orders are already being placed to the shipbuilders in Europe and also the US. So the biggest cruise ships with the largest pax capacity is Royal Caribbean. And that slide shows the cruise tourism and cruise ship operation trend. And if you look at the passenger volumes and trends in Asia, you can see that there was some slight decrease between 2017 and 2019. But then after the COVID, you see that the number of passengers nosedived. And if you look at the cruise ship capacity, there was some increase before, but then again, it got hit hard by COVID-19. And here you can see the operating characteristics of cruise ships in Asia. So on the left-hand side, you can see the cruise line segments in Asia. So whether it's the premium, luxury, or upscale, or expedition or experience type. And on the right-hand side, you can see cruise ships by size. So there are 6 to 7 mega-sized ships and 20 large-sized ships, and also the mid-sized ships with 2,000 passenger capacity. There are about 26 or 27. So, and this slide is slightly complicated. So it indicates the destination by total calls in Asia, and you can see that the Japan ranks number 1 in terms of the number of calls, and Jeju Island once had the very high number of calls, but in 2020 there was only one single call. And in Japan there are about 100 destination ports. So in the past, Korea also had the booming cruise industry, but because of the THAAD and the conflict with China, the cruise industry was hit hard, and because of that, the number of calls declined significantly. And here you can see the ports by total calls in Asia. Again, the Jeju Island, it actually suffers from a massive decline. And this is because Korea does not have its own cruise vessels, and therefore it is very vulnerable to external shock. If there are no vessels calling from China, then it translates into a direct toll on the cruise industry, and therefore we have to have our own cruise vessels in order to stabilize the industry. And this is about the crude source markets in Asia. So if you look at the Asian market, as I said earlier, so the passenger capacity was maintained around 40,000, but then in year 2020, it declined significantly. So Korea, Taiwan, and other countries, they all suffered from the significant declining of the passenger numbers. But if you look at Taiwan, you can see that although Taiwan is smaller than Korea, and also it has smaller population than Korea, but still it has bigger demand of cruise tourism than Korea, and this is because of the number of port calls that they have. So this shows that compared with the other Asian countries, Korea does have relatively smaller cruise market, and this is because we failed to create demand for cruise industry. So now I'd like to focus on Korean situation. One of the biggest problems in the Korean market is lack of demand. So here you see the number of cruise passengers in Korea. A clear figure shows 45,000, but in reality, for the cruise travelers departing from Korea, they amount to about 22,000. In other words, compared with the total population, very small number of travelers sail and cruise in Korea. And this is the survey that we conducted, and we found that we actually have huge potential demand as well as the large effective demand. However, the actual users of the cruise vessels the number remain very slow, and also, so on average, about 8,500 passengers board cruise annually on weekends. and even the maximum annual passenger volume in a single year reached only 15,000. And this shows that we have failed to attract demand for cruise tourism. Again, this slide shows a sluggish demand in Korea. So demand in countries with smaller population than Korea do have greater demand for outbound cruise than Korea. So if you compare Korea and Taiwan and also other countries, you can see that the cruise travelers in Taiwan is 390,000 and in Malaysia 190,000, whereas Korea does have a very small number of cruise travelers. The textbook says that the cruise demand is mainly driven by the number of population and the wealth of the country, but it's not really applicable to Korea. So this one shows that the demand for cruise is determined by frequency of cruise supply. In other words, number of calls from home port. That determines the demand rather than the population or consumption level. And this indicates the visits by inbound travelers to Korea. And you can see that the trend is very, very unstable. So Korea was hit by third issue with China and as well as COVID-19. And this unstable pattern shows that Korea is very vulnerable and susceptible to external shock. And in 2016, most of the inbound travelers, cruise travelers, are from China. But in year 2019, the Chinese travelers represented only 1%. And because of that, the whole cruise market in Korea got reduced significantly. So that's something that we have to overcome. And this slide shows the value chain of the cruise industry. As you can see, the cruise shipbuilding and shipbuilders and cruise ships, they are the most critical centerpieces of the industry. So the cruise ships have to be built and maintained. So there are shipbuilders and maintenance operators. And on the right hand side, there are cruise tourists. And they also create their own markets. So the red one indicates what Korea has, and the yellow and white ones, these are the things that Korea does not have. And you can see that because Korea does not have any capacity in the cruise ship building, so we do have some serious limitation for the growth of the cruise industry. So we don't have shipbuilders, we don't have cruise ship lines, whereas the Europe, they have everything. That's why the cruise industry is booming there. This slide is very complicated again, but this shows who leads the cruise industry. So the cruise lines as well as cruise shipbuilders, they are the main drivers of the cruise industry. And also there are some other partners that grow in tandem. But because Korea fails to have these key industries and we only focus on tourism, and therefore the growth pattern of the cruise industry in Korea is very, very unstable. For example, like if you look at Busan, you can see that only branch offices are there and there are no headquarters of cruise company. What about the cruise policies? So we have the cruise tourism policies, cruise shipbuilding policies, and so on. And if you look at situations in public organizations in Korea, you see that we don't really have the dedicated organization that focuses on cruise industry, and we only try to attract the cruise travelers. So regarding the cruise shipbuilding industry, Korea has no policy at all, none. And therefore, I believe that the government has to devise new measures to nurture the balanced growth of the cruise industry as a whole. And also, you can see that in terms of the expertise and years of experience, compare with the private sectors, the public officers, they have to build their expertise. And therefore, in order to develop the cruise industry in the future, yes, there are many, many opportunities. Especially, we have to establish the mutually beneficial ecosystem for cruise tourism, shipbuilding, and shipping. Only then, I believe, Korea can emerge as a hub of cruise industry in Northeast Asia. And for this, I think we really have to redouble our efforts. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to expand demand for a cruise market. As I said earlier, compared with the Taiwan and Malaysia, Korea does have the relatively smaller market for cruise. Why? It's because of the number of calls, and it's because of the demand. In other words, a lot of cruise vessels depart from home ports in those countries, and therefore, in order to expand the demand, the way that we have to follow is that we have to increase the number of calls for domestic cruise, and we also have to provide support to attract charter cruises. And also, I believe that we have to activate the coast cruise in order to create new demand. And here you can see the number of passengers of coast cruise in Korea. So the Harmony and the Pansta, they operate coast cruise programs. And you can see that year 2012, there was a high spike in terms of the number of passengers, and this is because of the activation of the cruise program. And therefore, I believe it is very important to operate coast cruise. And for this, we have to create the favorable business conditions for cruise lines. And also, we have to offer the ship financing in order to support the relevant industries. Because currently we have no financing scheme available. And also we have to nurture the shipbuilders specialized in cruise ships, as well as the liners specialized in cruise ships. As you know, the cruise is the industry where supply creates demand. In other words, Say's law is very relevant in the cruise industry. So the CLIA representative talked about the 1.16 million jobs, and all of these are actually from the cruise shipbuilding and mainly from the cruise shipbuilding and cruise line industry. So I think, but because Korea does not have none of them, so we really have to cultivate these industries. And also financing is critical for the growth of the cruise industry. So let's say that there is a cruise ship owner, and we have to develop various financial schemes to support them. So, like for example, like private financing can be utilized as a senior loan, and the public organization can participate as junior lenders. So just like the containerized vessels, you see that the private financing is offered as senior lending program, so that the private sectors could have the assurance for repayment. So the cruise lines place orders to cruise ship builders and also charter cruise vessels to the cruise operators. And in that sense, I believe it can create industry ecosystem. And for this, again, the financing scheme has to be devised to support the industry growth. And cruise shipbuilding is important for the future of cruise industry, but we cannot immediately have this industry because we have a long way to go. And in that sense, I believe in the interim phase, we can establish the R&D center for cruise shipbuilding. In fact, Korea is a powerhouse when it comes to shipbuilding industry. And the main vessels that the Korean shipbuilders focus on, their new build prices are continuously declining, including the container vessels as well as the tankers and so on. And therefore, in terms of profitability, these vessels are not really the right choices and attractive. So you can see that Korean shipbuilders, they are suffering from the declining profitability despite increase in the volume of orders that they take. So the actual revenues and profits decline. And share prices are also suffering. Why? Because they do have the structural problems and they have lost a very high value added market. And in the sense, I believe that they can convert their business models to focus more on the cruise ship buildings. And for this, we can establish the R&D center first and then eventually cultivate the cruise ship building industry in Korea. However, the central government will not really move fast for this, so the local governments have to make requests. So this should be a sort of the bottom-up approach. And in fact, in Europe, we can see the resumption of the shipbuilders because of huge demand for cruise shipbuilding. And this slide talks about the strengthening of the administration system for cruise industry. So we have to establish the Cruise Industry Policy Committee as well as the Cruise Development Council in order to build sufficient infrastructures. And also we have to develop expertise and know-how among the public officers who are in charge of cruise industry. And also various education and training programs have to be developed and provided. In fact, we have these cruise training programs are almost non-existent, and therefore the local governments as well as central governments, they have to provide opportunities for government officers to receive trainings on cruise industry. So this is the conclusion. The Ministry of Offshore and Fisheries came up with this press report that the cruise tourism industry lead the Korea's future economy. And I believe that the cruise industry can be a successful substitution of the shipbuilding industry that's declining in Korea because it will create a huge demand in the future. And this shows how European countries have developed the cruise and the tourism industry. And Italy, Germany, you see that they have a lot of jobs for cruise industry. Why? Because they do have the cruise ship builders and cruise lines, whereas other countries which have no cruise ship builders and cruise lines, there you can see that the job creation is very minimal. So this indicates how important it is for Korea to have the cruise ship builders as well as the cruise lines. And with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.